Finn O'Connor was born in a foggy, windswept village perched on the cliffs of Northern Ireland. His family lived in a small stone cottage with a roof patched by old sails. His father worked as a stonemason, carving rocks for wealthy landlords who barely paid him enough to keep food on the table. His mother washed clothes for the gentry in the nearby town, her hands raw and cracked from the cold water. Finn learned early that life was relentless, that every day demanded work, sweat, and courage just to survive. By the age of 10, Finn was already helping his father haul heavy stones and carry water from the well. He was small for his age, and his muscles ached constantly, but his spirit was larger than the cliffs themselves. Every night, after the fire burned low, he listened to travelers' tales from the mainland. Stories of merchants who built empires, of men who turned small trades into fortunes. Finn would lie awake, dreaming of a life beyond the cliffs, beyond the gray waves, beyond the poverty that had been his only companion. When he was 14, his father fell ill from exhaustion and cold. The village had no doctor capable of helping him, and the family's savings were gone. Finn had no choice but to leave for the town across the bay to find work. He walked for 2 days through mud, rain, and wind, carrying only a small bundle of bread and a worn coat. The town was alive with noise, horse carts clattering over cobblestones, merchants shouting in English, sailors calling to one another from the docks. Finn's Irish accent was thick, his clothes ragged, yet he did not shrink from the chaos. He had learned that fear was a luxury he could not afford. He found work as a laborer at a small bakery near the harbor. He swept floors, carried sacks of flour, and cleaned ovens from dawn to dusk. Most of the time he was ignored, sometimes mocked, but he never complained. While working, he watched the bakers knead dough, measure ingredients, and manage the ovens with skill and precision. He realized that the men who succeeded were not necessarily the strongest. They were the ones who paid attention, learned, and worked smarter. Finn began to memorize recipes, practice kneading when the bakers were asleep, and experiment with different techniques using the scraps he could afford. By 16, Finn had saved a small sum of coins. Observing that many merchants complained about poor quality bread for their crews and travelers, he decided to take a risk. He rented a tiny shop, barely more than a room with a hearth, and began baking loaves using improved recipes he had developed in secret. At first, no one came. People laughed at the boy baker with nothing, but Finn persevered. Each loaf he sold was perfect, consistent, and delicious. Slowly, merchants began to notice. They placed repeat orders, and soon the small shop earned enough to pay rent and buy better ingredients. Finn's success attracted attention. One day, a wealthy trader approached him, offering a contract to supply bread to ships traveling to England and Scotland. The income would be enough to double the size of his bakery. Finn accepted, but with careful planning. He hired a few young assistants from poor families, teaching them the techniques he had mastered. He introduced schedules, measurements, and quality controls that were unheard of in the small town. Orders were fulfilled on time, every loaf consistent in size, shape, and flavor. Finn became known as the boy who made perfect bread. Business grew quickly. He realized that bread alone would never make him wealthy unless he expanded further. Observing the shipping routes and merchant needs, he added cakes, pastries, and preserved goods for ships, creating durable products that could survive long journeys. He partnered with fishermen to supply dried fish, and with farmers to supply salted butter. Finn's little bakery became a trading hub, a place where coastal merchants could source multiple essentials from one reliable source. His reputation spread across ports, and soon even nobles requested his bread for their tables. But success brought challenges. Rivals tried to undercut him, fires threatened the shop, and sometimes shipments were lost to storms at sea. Finn faced every setback with discipline and focus. When a shipment of bread was ruined by damp, he redesigned storage methods, invented waterproof packaging, and trained his assistants to inspect every item carefully. When his competitors spread false rumors, he remained calm, improving his products further and letting the quality speak for itself. Every obstacle became an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to strengthen his business. By 25, Finn O'Connor owned a thriving bakery and trading business. His shops employed dozens, and his products reached ports and towns along the northern coasts. Yet, he remained humble. He remembered the small village he came from, the cold nights, the hunger, and his mother's tired hands. He sent money home, built a proper house for her, and provided work for villagers who needed it. Finn understood that wealth was meaningless unless it could improve the lives of others. He continued expanding. Using profits from his bakery and trade, he invested in small ships to transport his goods directly rather than relying on middlemen. He learned navigation, trade routes, and negotiation with foreign merchants. Soon he owned a fleet of vessels, each stocked with his goods and sailed by captains he personally trained. Finn's business had evolved from a humble bakery to a full coastal trade empire, supplying food, goods, and provisions to merchants, sailors, and towns along the shores of Ireland, Scotland, and England. By 30, Finn's name carried weight. People respected not just his wealth, but his discipline, honesty, and vision. He was consulted by other traders, invited to advise on commerce, and admired by apprentices who aspired to rise from poverty like he had. Finn often reflected on the long road he had walked. The barefoot boy gathering peat, the night spent by a dying fire, the fear of the unknown. Every hardship, every failure, every sleepless night had shaped him into a man capable of turning nothing into something extraordinary. Standing one evening on the deck of his largest trading vessel, watching the sun sink into the horizon, Finn whispered to himself, "I began with nothing but hunger and determination." Every loss, every trial, every mistake was a step toward this. The world tests those who dream, but persistence, discipline, and courage can turn dreams into reality. Finn O'Connor's story became legend among coastal towns and villages. A boy who began with nothing rose to create a trade empire, proving that skill, relentless work, learning, and integrity could outshine birth, wealth, or luck. He inspired countless young men and women to believe that the limits set by poverty, fear, or society could be overcome if they dared to act, endure, and grow every day. His life showed that the greatest riches are not coins alone, but respect, skill, vision, and the ability to lift others as you rise.